Her Excellency, the Governor, Ms. Julia Crouch, Honorable Premier Minister of Finance, Immigration, Labor, Home Affairs, and Constitutional Affairs, Mrs. Cora Richardson Hodge, Honorable Minister of Health, Tourism, and Sports, Mr. Cardigan Connor, Honorable Minister of Economic Development, Industry, Commerce, Lands, Planning, Water, and Natural Resources, Mr. Kyle Hodge, Honorable Minister of Infrastructure, Communications, Utilities, Housing, Information Technology, and E-Government Services, Mr. Jose Vanterpool, Honorable Elected Member, Mr. Hayden Hughes, Honorable Elected Member, Mr. Merrick Richardson, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Social Development, Dr. Barney Richardson Hodge, Barney Richardson Lake, Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Aisha Aldwin, Director of DYC, Ms. Avon Carty. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to each of you to Straight Up Conversations 2025. I will now invite Ms. Melissa Harrigan, who will lead us in prayer.
Good evening, everyone. I ask that you please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here this evening. And for those who are on their way, we ask that you bring them safely. As we engage here this evening, we ask that persons would feel comfortable and encouraged to ask whatever is on their minds. We pray that there is clear and respectful communication, and throughout the dialogue, where ideas, solutions, and strategies emerge. We also ask, dear Lord, that we leave here feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to play our roles in materializing the desired and necessary change in our society. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Good evening again, everyone. We're so glad you could be a part. You're not hearing? My apologies. Honorable Minister of Education, Library Services, Social Development, and Department of Youth and Culture, Mrs. Shelia Rogers-Webster. Please accept my humblest apologies. It's truly a wonderful night to see many familiar faces here. Tonight is all about you, the youth, the people of Anguilla, coming together to share ideas with our leaders. We want to acknowledge our vibrant community, the youth, entrepreneurs, educators, and citizens who continue to drive positive change and make Anguilla proud. To keep this evening flowing, we'll be guided by two dynamic moderators who are no strangers to keeping things real and engaging. Please join me in welcoming our moderators for tonight, Mr. Devon Carter, and Miss Isabel Curtis. So I will now hand over to them and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hello, everyone, once again. My name is Devon Carter, Dean of the National Youth Ambassador Corps. So some questions will be directed to particular persons, but we do believe that this should be open, so if anybody else would like to add respond as well, that is also okay. So the first question is directed to the Minister of Education, Ms. Shelia Rogers-Webster. Mrs. What new initiatives are being introduced to help young people access higher education or vocational training locally and abroad? I repeat the question again. What new initiatives are being introduced to help young people access higher education or vocational training locally or abroad?
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. This administration is keen on ensuring that we support young Anguillan students who want to go overseas. Once we came into office, one of the things that we recognized was that there were a number of outstanding scholarships that were not taken in various areas, and we would have reached out to public administration and the necessary departments to ensure that some of those scholarships could have been taken. However, because of the time, there was a short window between September and once we came in and public admin's administrative period. What we have agreed to do moving forward is to work with public administration to restructure the application process for scholarships generally. We think it's important for general members of the public to have equal access to scholarships as public servants. So I think it's critically important that we advertise very publicly the scholarships that are available, but also to give young Anguillians an opportunity to be able to access funds that are available. And I will tell you, moving forward in the 2026 budget, there will be considerable contributions available for access to those things. So I encourage persons to apply. What we want to do is advertise it more than ever before so that persons know exactly when the application period is, when it opens, when it closes. They know exactly what's expected of them, and they also know what is the lead time leading up for them to be able to get a response if they were unsuccessful. So we want that process to be much more transparent, open. Persons have access to it. You know exactly who are receiving government scholarships. So we're working with public administration to improve that process overall.
Thank you so much for your answers, incredibly comprehensive. I was just wondering, is there a particular industry you'll be focusing on, or will it be a broad spectrum?
Very broad spectrum. Obviously, from a government perspective, we recognize some of the areas that are deficient in our country. We are deficient in some specialized areas, certainly in education, health, and other areas. And so a key focus of ours is going to be ensuring that we have the requisite scholarships for the technical areas in education and health. But generally, there will be a pool of scholarships available for general areas and general programs that young Anguillians can have access to. I also want to say that if you work in the public service and you have an appetite to do studies or training at UE, there is currently a policy, and it has been in place for a number of years, where you can apply to get financial assistance. Government will pay for 70% of that, and 30% will be covered by the individual if you work in the public service. Also, a new initiative that we have is ensuring that we fully cover the early childhood education training, both degree-based training and short-term training for early childhood educators. This is something that has not been done traditionally. So we will not be doing, even though a number of them are doing it with UE, we will not just be covering 30, 70. We'll be covering all of it for all early childhood education teachers that have a desire to do further training, because that is in line with our commitment to enhance early childhood education.
Yes.
We have recently committed to giving additional support to students who are already overseas. I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's been well over 18 plus years that the fees associated with students who are on scholarship, those fees have remained the same. Obviously, the cost of living generally globally has drastically increased over the years. So it was a bit unfair. We found that students who were overseas, in some cases, were struggling because the fees associated with it hadn't changed for a very long period of time. So we recently committed to ensuring that that is increased as well, and we didn't wait until next year to do that. We did that immediately because we saw the need to be able to do that.
Honorable Minister Jose Vanderpool.
Testing. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I just was actually going to add the point that the minister would have added at the end, that beyond providing opportunities for our students who want to have access to scholarships, we need to make sure that once they're out there in the world and operating that, we give them the level of assistance that's necessary for them to not only survive, but to actually be able to thrive. And as two students who have benefited from government scholarships, it's something that's very near and dear to our hearts. And even back when I was a student, I didn't find it was sufficient. And as the minister would have said, The cost of transport is going up, the cost of living generally. So we need to make sure that once our students are placed out there in the environment, that we give them the necessary resources. So I'm very happy that this administration would have recently made that commitment and level of support.
Premier Ms. Courage Richardson Hodge.
Yes. Thank you. Good evening to all. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is actually my 10th straight-up conversations, and so I'm very excited. Thank you. In addition to what the other ministers have mentioned, one of the things that we've identified is that our children, our young people leaving high school and seeking tertiary education, they're very concerned about not being able to have the kind of resources that they need. So you're in fifth form, you're in sixth form, you have no idea where you go from there. So for instance, many of our young people may not know that loans, as British Overseas Territories, citizens, we can access loan opportunities in the UK. Many of our children may not know how to access the scholarship opportunities that may be available, but also being able to even apply to universities. And from sixth form, which area do you go? Do you go to community college? And the route from having the associate's degree, if you're going towards the US, or the sixth form degree and going towards the UK. So we're trying to look at ways in which we can filter that information. It's there, but it is not readily available to our young people. And so you'll hear the continuous cry that, you want to go, our young people want to go off to school, they want greater opportunities, but they're not sure how to be able to do that. And so we want to open the door and allow that information to be filtered down through the school system, through using counselors, etc., so that many of our young people have greater opportunities to be able to access tertiary education. Thank you.
Sorry, could I just add as well, through the Ministry of Sports, I think for quite a while we've seen from tennis, there have been a number of scholarships, and from football, but the fact that sports like cricket, golf, we haven't really paid much attention to in recent times regarding scholarships. So that is an area in my ministry that I'm very keen to take forward. We look to introduce it into the schools. The fact that you don't have to be a major league player, you don't have to win a major, but if you consider with one of the best golf courses in the Caribbean, it'd be ideal if we've got some Anguillians who can work their way up to actually running the place. And I think that is vitally important. But also for parents as well. There's nothing better to have your child take themselves through college. The fact is that it is very expensive. And there's something special about a student athlete. I think there's a lot of development physically, mentally, and intellectually. So I think it is vitally important that for us as the new government, we'll do all we can to make sure that our youngsters are given that opportunity.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I have a follow-up question. This was actually a submitted question as well. Is there plans to expand the sports program? Is there financial support that will be offered, especially for golf, which is kind of a sport that has kind of a high barrier to entry in terms of costs? Are there plans to address that?
Well, I think with golf, it should be easy. The fact is that golf as a sport probably puts more money into the treasury than any other sport in Anguilla. So the benefits that comes from that, I think it's only right that government reinvests back into the youth. And it's about opportunity. The fact is that although it might seem to be an individual sport, it's very nationalistic. If you ever saw the Ryder Cup, the passion that is there, or even at the Olympics, you got someone, like Scheffler, who won the US Open, in fact, is the #1 player in the world. But to win for his country, he was crying. It says something special about that. And there's nothing better, I think, that when a youngster feels that his country is giving him something, him or her, I should say, and in return, we know they will give back. It might take some time, but it's a good investment in our youth.
Honorable Minister Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just add, while we're on the topic of sports, we know boat racing is Anguilla's national sport. And we have been in conversation with the investor for the marina, and they are keen on investing in sailing. So we know we have the Anguilla Youth Sailing Club, and they have some land that they use in Sanderground, and we are embarking on regularizing a lease that they can expand their operations, and the investor would put in a huge sum of money to be able to buy some new sailing boats and also to expand their facility. And just recently as well, we have students excelling in swimming, and they have to go to Anguilla Great House, which is a little small pool to do their training and to do the different strokes that they perform. They also have to travel to St. Martin to utilize their pool. And I know the Premier and the Minister of Education would have had a conversation recently with a potential funder. So that is something that is active. We spoke to them recently. They already have plans and designs for an aquatic pool that can host regional OECS CARICOM tournaments, and we are fully on board. And that is to come in the very near future.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, I'll let you respond.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My pleasure to be here once again with Straight Up Talks. Just to add to the part of scholarships for sports, it's also important that the community play their part. Those who are familiar with basketball will know the Tapil Club under the tutelage of Yvette Harrigan and Buster Brooks. For 2 years now, they've been running a program. They've been bringing in coaches that have been identifying talent. Last year, 2 young men went off and excelled at the New Mexico school in New Mexico. One even went on to participate in long jump, won the state long jump championship. So it shows the importance of not just government doing their part, but the communities coming together and doing their part. But when communities step up, it's also important for government to recognize that, hey, the community is doing their part. Us now as government, when I say us, I mean because government represents everyone. Us as government also do the part to ensure that these youngsters have a chance when they do qualify for these scholarships.
Thank you. I believe there's a question from the swim group, but since Minister Kyle Hodge did mention this aquastars and swimming, I'm going to just leave them put their question in since we're on the topic. You can introduce yourself, say your name and the group that you're representing.
I'm Kailani Richardson, and I'm Kailani Richardson, and I'm representing Anguilla Aquastars.
My name is Kaylee Vanterpool, and I'm also representing Anguilla Aquastars. We did have a question about possibly getting an aquatic station and funding for overseas trips like OECS and CARIFTA, but you already answered those questions, so thank you very much. I have a follow-up.
I'm happy we answered that question, but Kyle didn't delve too far into it. But as he indicated, both the Premier and I are committed to ensuring that we do have a space where our swimmers can work out, can feel comfortable. It's a public-private partnership, and so we are committed to doing that. We see the work that you guys are doing on your own without all of the resources, and so we are also committed to ensuring that we're able over time to provide you guys with a fit-for-purpose space that you can do even better things in.
If I may, during my time as Minister of Tourism, I had meetings with investors, local investors who are desirous of developing a pool, an Olympic-sized pool in Anguilla. We had reached advanced stages of those discussions in January of this year to develop a swimming pool in Blowing Point, next to the Blowing Point sports facility. So you would have a multi-purpose facility in that you'll have the Blowing Point indoor facility that will host basketball and things like that, community events. And then next to it, adjacent to it, you will have the Olympic-sized swimming pool. And then rest of that, you will have the Anguilla Football Association football field. So all of those we are doing collaboratively together. So I don't know where those discussions are, as you know. We are no longer in office, but based on what I'm hearing, that those discussions continue. I also want to say something as a matter of clarity as it relates to golf. The Minister of Sports spoke about, at some point in time, Anguillians taking over golf at the golf course. Anguillians have taken over golf at the golf course. The manager of the golf course is an Anguillian. Is he Anguillian or not? Okay.
Thank you so much for everybody for their contributions, and including Anguilla Aquastars. Moving slightly in another direction, I would like to address Honorable Minister Shelia. Sorry. So when it comes to families emigrating to Anguilla, specific in the education system, there are a large number of ESL students, English as a second language. What strategies are we currently employing to help integrate those students or address the difficulties that they face?
I think that's an excellent question, and I wish my colleague Jason was here. Jason actually worked on a really great strategic document around ESL, both from initial stages straight into integration into the school. I would have recently approved that particular document, and now he's going to move forward with the education department to see how it can be implemented. Obviously, there's funding that is going to be needed and associated with that. We've made a number of significant adjustments to the overall system. So it's important that ESL students that are coming into the island, they need to apply during the summer period to be able to come in. There will be no admissions of students during the academic year because that has a significant impact on the education system and existing teachers. We had a challenge this year in terms of classroom sizes, particularly at the Campus B level. Campus B is at its capacity, and we don't have a lot of flexibility. A number of the classes are oversubscribed as well. So we're in the process of trying to recruit additional teachers to make some of those class sizes a bit smaller. So there were a number of students who at the Campus B level were not able to be admitted as a result of that. One of the things that Jason and I are going to work on as well is putting a intermediary group in place that will help with the transition process. So that group will include a representative from immigration, a representative from obviously the Department of Education, and of course we have Harvey as well, who's our Spanish-speaking representative. I think he's here. He's right in our presence back there, and he will help to lead the charge on that. And essentially, there will be a guiding document for persons who are desirous of having their children migrate to Anguilla. And this is not just for ESL students. This is also for persons. We have a number of nurses, doctors, teachers who are migrating, and there are special requirements that are required, vaccinations and lots of different things, and everyone doesn't know. And so sometimes it can be very difficult navigating the public sector system in terms of getting responses from various government departments, and you have to engage with different government departments. So we think it's critically important that we have that team in place to be able to help to navigate coming in, whether through immigration as well as education. So it's a high priority for us. One of the things that we recognize as well is that our ESL teachers need additional training. When I would have met with a number of teachers earlier in the year, some of the ESL teachers said, we love what we do, but we recognize that we need additional training, additional support. So when I mentioned earlier about making sure that we have specialty training next year, that's ESL is one of the key areas that's going to be included in that specialty training, because we recognize that the teachers themselves are saying we can do more if we have the requisite training. So it's something that's very high on our radar. We recognize as well that there may be a need for a higher level of immersion, where students are in the English immersion program for longer than just a few hours of the day, so we are looking towards that. That is going to require additional space and additional resources, but it definitely is something that we're looking towards, because we're seeing more and more ESL students migrating, and we want to make sure that we do two things: make it convenient and comfortable for them coming in, but also for the teachers who are on the ground and the students who are on the ground to make sure that the transition is not too burdensome, and so it's an easier process overall.
Thank you.
I just want to go back to the initial question about, the question was asked about what are you doing for the youth and so forth. So while we were in government, we allocated a couple $1 million, I believe it was about $3 million for scholarships for 2025. A lot of those scholarships, I think the minister spoke about it, wasn't taken up. There was also about 200 digital scholarships, But also, there was a number of persons who applied for scholarships, and they have not been, basically they have not gotten any return on their applications. So some of them have already gone off to university and so forth, without hearing anything back. And this is not a blame on any particular person, but that is just a matter of fact. But one of the things that we have to also recognize when it comes to young people is that young people have passions about this particular area, this particular job, and we have to recognize the environment in which we are. Back in 2001, I read a book, and I always reference it. It was called Lessons to be Learned in a Post-Pandemic Era. It was by Fareed Zakaria. And he was talking about the tremendous rise and rapid advancement in AI, in artificial intelligence, and things that would have taken 15, 20, 30 years to develop. Because there were no touch points during the time of COVID, they are being rapidly advanced. Driverless vehicles, driverless trucks, things like robotics and so forth. It was really rapidly advancing. And those of you who are my age will remember the Terminator movies. And today there's a real possibility that this could be our fate. But my point is that when we are advising young people to go after university, we need to advise them to go into a field that there will be opportunities, because a lot of the jobs of today and a lot of the people who are going to university today are studying for jobs that will not be there when they finish. And this is important, and it can dampen the spirits. And you'll see, I saw, I'm going to just make this quick point. I saw an interview with Elon Musk, and what he was saying is that across the world, governments will start to have to allocate funds to pay their citizens because there will be no jobs. And in the United States today, you see the highest number of joblessness of university graduates, the highest level of joblessness for persons who go into entry-level positions. And that is because of what is happening in the world today in terms of artificial intelligence. So we need to understand this, and not because we're in the Caribbean, we may be a little slow in terms of what is happening in China and Singapore and the United States and so forth. But it will come to our shores, so we need to recognize that as well when we're advising young people about what is it that they should move forward in terms of studying and what so forth.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is a question to Her Excellency the Governor. What role can the UK play in protecting our borders from drug trafficking as well as overfishing by foreign boats?
Well, thanks and good evening. Pleasure also to be able to join you. My first such event. I think the borders, protecting our borders, as we know, is an absolutely critical part of our national security. There has been quite a lot done recently. Most importantly, probably our new radar system, our new maritime surveillance system. What this has done is given us visibility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of boats coming in and out of Anguilla. It also feeds into our new Joint Emergency Control Centre, which is again staffed 24/7. And it also has a system of alerts. So if the police are looking out for a particular boat, or they want to be alerted if people are coming in at 2 in the morning at a certain speed, the system can do all of that. So that's one thing the UK has done recently. There are all sorts of things that the UK does with the RAPF. I mean, it's a partnership. All of these things have to be in a partnership. The RAPF have built really strong links with the French and the Dutch over the last few years. So if we have an issue like we did over Carnival, we can call up our Dutch colleagues and they'll send us boats, etc. They work with us. They share intelligence very closely. You may be leading up to the fact that we are a bit short of boats. I think that's just a fact. Although the Fire and Rescue Service have boats, they have a very good search and rescue boat and a small search and rescue boat. The police are just down to one boat. That's very much a focus for the coming year to see what we can do to improve that. In terms of fishing and protecting our wildlife, which I know is definitely an interest of yours, Devon, and all of us, this maritime surveillance should help with that, because again it'll tell us what boats come in and out. It doesn't expand as far as we would like, but there's the option to extend it with further cameras if people feel that that's a priority for the investment. So that's some of the things that we're doing. There's also been work on the computer system. So as you come in and out of the ports, you'll notice that your passports are being scanned. That system of understanding who's coming in and out is constantly being upgraded. We had somebody again on island a couple of weeks ago. So that system is constantly, so we get alerts. So you've heard of Interpol red notices, perhaps. If we know that there's somebody we don't want in our borders, that's all in the system. That alerts immigration staff. In fact, I think they stopped somebody leaving through that alert system fairly recently. So that's another example.
Honorable Minister Kyle, as a follow-up, what is,
Just before the follow-up, all the governor said is great because we do need every possible technology that we have to patrol our borders. But what we also need, and there's been a plea and a cry from the residents of Sandy Ground recently, is for the police station to be manned and back up to being a marine base. Those of us who live close to coastline or driving the coastline can see boats coming and going all hours of the night. Yes, some are fishing boats, but I'm sure you governors are aware that there's also a lot of illegal activity. We all know the proliferation of guns coming into the island, and I think having the marine base up and running full-time and fully staffed will go a long way in helping us with that issue.
No, thank you for raising that. I think there's two things. One is the sort of marine unit that has been re-established, but unfortunately the boat that they use is off the water at the moment being repaired. That will be back. But it's also about police staffing, and you say about properly staffing that police station. What I'm pleased to say is that the RAPF will be launching a new recruitment round fairly soon. And the good thing about the new recruitment round is they're going to particularly be looking for Anguillians who haven't worked in the police before. We're going to be funded by the UK Home Office to run a basic training. So for people, we've been recently recruiting people who are already qualified, but we're now looking also to expand it to the new young people who want to join the police and have a really good career in the police. So I'm excited for that. So please do look out for adverts to join the Royal Anguilla Police Force. It can be a really brilliant career. We're investing a lot in local Anguillians going off and getting postgraduate qualifications. We're developing more and more links with other territories and other people in the region. So it is an exciting career to join the police. And I very much hope that the work that PwC are doing on pay will also mean that it pays a little bit better in the new year as well.
Okay, Honorable Minister Kyle Hodge, as a follow-up, how is Anguilla addressing overfishing? How is the government addressing overfishing?
Overfishing?
Yes.
Okay,
overfishing. If it is a problem.
Right. So, I mean, we still need to gather more data as it relates to overfishing. I don't think we have a proper mechanism in place right now to even give us data as to the fish we currently catch. More or less to understand what's the data on the fish that other vessels catch. It is a big problem. It is something that, together with the United Kingdom government, in order to get some support in terms of satellite systems or radar systems to be able to patrol and to monitor beyond 20 miles. I think currently, we have some big fishing vessels, maybe 85 feet long, and the extent they go out is probably 80 miles, just about 100 miles. So there's still a lot more for us to do as it relates to our 200 nautical miles of fishing ground. So, we're going to continue to dialogue with the United Kingdom government, the governor, to see how we can get some assistance as it relates to being able to monitor our waters.
I want to follow up on what Minister Kyle said about fisheries and so forth, right? Many years ago, the United Kingdom assigned a fisheries expert, Mr. Stevenson, in Anguilla. I think he was here during the 1990s and he developed a fishing plan. And I know James Gums, he's no longer in fisheries, but he was also part of that process. I'm not concerned about local fishermen overfishing. The minister said we have 200 nautical miles. We have 200 nautical miles of ocean, which is one of the largest ocean territories in the Caribbean. I'm more concerned about others fishing in our territories rather than our fishermen exploiting them, because the smaller fishing boats in Anguilla only go out to maybe 30 miles. The large one, Deep Faith, goes out to maybe 60, 70, 80 miles, right? So there's 120 miles that are untapped. And that one ship, Deep Faith, is not going to overfish. And I think that from the years that I spent in hospitality, all fishermen have been extremely careful in how they fish. For example, in terms of the lobster and crayfish, which is the crayfish, I don't see crayfish like this in Anguilla anywhere else, right? They always, we would never see, when I was a purchasing manager, we never saw them bring in lobster and crayfish that had eggs. And they made a conscious effort to ensure that they didn't do so. Now they've always had concerns about parrotfish and the way, it protects our reefs and what have you. And the days of us going and throwing a line into the ocean and pulling a fish without bait are no more. But like I said again, I'm not concerned about local fishermen overfishing. And I remember many years ago when Canada and the United Kingdom was policing our waters, invariably they would confiscate a Korean or Japanese fishing boat, and these boats was big like the container ships that comes to Anguilla, and they will bring them into Santa Ground, they will find them, they will take their catch and so forth. So these are the things that happened 30 years ago, 35 years ago. But today, it seems as if we have lapsed, not necessarily us because we don't have the resources, but the partners that we've had that police those waters to ensure that our resources not exploited for somebody else and not to our benefit is no more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just to follow up quickly to what the minister was saying, I think it's very important for us to understand as a country, as community, as fishermen, that data is important. Data is very, very important. And I know a lot of the fishermen aren't too keen to share the data that is needed to make firm decisions, because without the data, government can't really address if there's overfishing or not. So it's going to be important for we as a country, community, fisher folks all over that understand the importance of giving the correct data so that the correct decisions could be made to protect them, not just for long term, because fishing is one of those industries where it's passed down from generation to generation, and if they want to see their children and their grandchildren continue, it's going to be real, real important that this data is collected and shared.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister Kyle, I have one follow-up question relating to our recent signature onto the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. How do you see this? Is this going to change our current legislation? Is there something we as a general public should know, or is that still in the works?
Well, we have outdated legislation. No doubt about it. We need to review the current fisheries legislation that we have. The current director of fisheries, she have had it on the agenda to be updated. We haven't gotten a chance to really review it as yet, just come into office 8 months ago. It is perhaps on the legislative agenda for 2026, late 2026. So with the CRFM, they're there for support. The other islands would have updated their legislation already. So we could learn from them the best practices and, things what not to do. So it's a good partnership that we have with the region.
Thank you.
We will take a question from the audience. Okay. Yes. Please introduce yourself and organization.
Hi, good night. I'm Louise. I just wanted to know, why does it take so long to change laws and legislation and stuff like that? Like, when we know that it's important to change these things to protect our fishermen, to protect the fish, to protect the environment, why does it take so long to change them? Just curious. Thank you.
A couple of things. So there's a process. There's a process for changing legislation generally. So review of the legislation needs to happen. Usually that is done at the department level in collaboration with the various ministries. Sometimes it requires a total overhaul of the legislation. Sometimes it requires short pieces of the legislation. But once you've done your reviews generally as a department or as a ministry, then you move on to the next phase, where you have to get the approval at Executive Council to develop the drafting instructions, to give the instructions, to develop the drafting instructions that will then go to the AG chambers to do the relevant drafting. At the AG chambers, they go through a process of research, evaluation. Usually the drafters are not persons who are trained in these particular areas. So there's a process that they go through as well in terms of evaluating, looking at other pieces of legislation, making comparisons, but also looking at the applicability of the changes to other pieces of legislation. Because sometimes you make adjustments to legislation, and then that has an effect on other pieces of legislation. So making sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And then after that, a draft piece of legislation is presented, and that draft has to be reviewed. It goes through back and forth, and then if adjustments are made, it goes back to the AG chambers. For example, myself, I'm trying aggressively to progress a piece of legislation that is practically finished, and I am at the most of the AG chambers because they have to do the necessary changes to move forward. So it can be a very long process, and it is frustrating for us as ministers as well, because we too want to progress legislation because depending on the type of legislation, it has financial implications. So there are a number of different things in relation to it. So it is a long process, and it can be challenging. But the other thing is that it's also about priority, because sometimes you have a number of different things happening in the particular department or ministry, and the adjustment of the legislation can't take priority at that particular period of time. So sometimes it's about prioritizing what needs your effort and your energy at the time, and what can wait a little bit later.
I want to add something to what the minister said about legislation. There's a few things. When I was minister, I made a suggestion that every ministry should have its own drafts person, right? And the difficulty with that is financial implications, because when you have to create your budgets, your national budgets, you will, every minister in every ministry and every department head have their wish lists, but there are spending parameters. And because of those spending parameters, those wish lists get deferred and cut back significantly. That's one. Secondly, the Attorney General's chambers is woefully under-resourced, woefully under-resourced. There's extremely capable and hard-working persons at the Attorney General's chambers. Hard-working. When I say hard-working, some of those persons, and I don't care to, I'm going to single out Serena Connor. When I was minister, and even on a Saturday and Sunday and holidays, she would be working. So I know for sure that they put in the work. But it's not enough. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many days in a week. There's so many weeks in a month. That's one. Secondly, when it comes to drafting legislation, there's a process, as the minister said, and the process begins with policy. A policy must be formulated, right? It goes to Executive Council for instructions. The policy, it comes from the governor, sends out the instructions to the department head. These are the persons supposed to work on the policy. The policy is then developed in the ministry. Once the policy is completed, you may or may not have public consultation, but let's say either which way, then it goes back to Executive Council for ratification. Once that ratification is done, then another paper, another memorandum goes to Executive Council for instructions to the Attorney General's chambers to draft the legislation based on the policy. Now, even as it relates to the legislation, it not only has to fall within certain financial parameters, but also you have to look at what other legislation across the region, across the world says, because our legislation must also align with other legislation, because at the end of the day, we are part of the global community. So there's a lot to it. The most and fastest legislation I ever see done was during the COVID time, right, for obvious reasons. But there's a lot to it, and ultimately it comes down to resources. And those resources just can't say, you know what, because there's this need, because there's this urgency, we're going to just slap the Attorney General's chambers with 5 more, 10 more drafters, because immigration need officers, customs need officers. Every department, including the Ministry of Infrastructure, needs officers, and there are unfilled roles in there for decades because of financial implications. So that way it comes down to, basically.
So this is going to be a follow-up to that. How is the government...
Sorry, before you get to the follow-up, the other part of the question is cultural norms. Take fishing, for example, like we were speaking about earlier. If you're about to make any changes to any legislation that has to deal with the fishermen, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. It's going to take, and very, very controversial. So it's going to take a lot of consultations, a lot of back and forth, because they always feel like the ones who are protecting the environment, they're trying to encroach on their fishing grounds and so forth and so forth. So sometimes a lot of it has to do with cultural norms. Also, there's a bill that one time caused the door on the House of Assembly to be broken down. So sometimes when the communities get involved, parliamentarians have to sometimes say, hey, this might be a little too controversial. Let's just put it on the back burner. And we all know when it comes to climate change and those type of things, we're not burning to the ground right now. So we always think we have some time. So like the minister said, other priorities come up. Okay, the environment, we're not going to burn up tomorrow. Let's put it back to a couple of years. And it's just reality. So sometimes a lot, like I said, is cultural norms and those things.
I just want to bring one point related to that. Just over 20 years ago this year, there was a piece of legislation called a physical planning bill that was tabled in the House, and it almost had a second revolution in Anguilla. Now, if you ask any young person or any person, is it fair for me to build my house and Kyle build a hog pen just upwind of it? That's not fair to me, right? But there's no legislation that stops Kyle from building his pig pen above my villa. So the idea was that we need to have legislation that ensures physical planning in terms of who builds where, in what area you build, and what can be built in that particular area. Now, Anguilla is different from every island in the Caribbean. We're the only people in the Caribbean that own our land. We're the only people in the Caribbean that own our land, from the outright, from the days of slavery to this day. In other countries, you had a plantocracy. Once they had the period of decolonization, the lands went to the state, and the state determines who get lands or who they allocate lands to or who they sell land to. We're unique. So how is it that you're going to tell me that a piece of land, and I'm just using me generally, a piece of land that has been passed down from generation to generation, I can't do my farming next to your luxury villa? And that created a lot of problems. But we know that for the past 20 years, the idea of the physical planning bill have come up in executive council meeting after executive council meeting after executive council meeting, and it can't go anywhere. It can't go anywhere because ultimately the politicians are representatives of the people. And if the people say we don't want this legislation, but we want this legislation, then what do? You heard what I said. We want this legislation, but we don't want this legislation. Because the legislation is welcomed when Kyle built his pig pen above my house. But it's not welcome when I tell him Kyle he can't build his pig pen above my house.
Okay, so this is a follow-up. This would have been more on the part of filling in the empty government roles. Like, how does the government of Anguilla plan to fill in the missing vacancies? And how do you guys prioritize which vacancies will be filled first if there's so many empty spots in all these ministries?
Okay, let me start, and then I'll let ministers add to it, and members of the opposition. So essentially, you have to start with a budget. So the government will decide every year, go through a budget negotiation process, spending the hard-earned money of the people of Anguilla to decide what its priorities are. Each department will bid and say, for example, AG's Chambers, we desperately need some more lawyers. And as Mr. Hughes said, Customs will say we desperately need some more customs officers, police will say we need some police officers. And then the elected members have to make difficult decisions about priorities. So it starts with the budget, essentially, and it feeds into the government's priorities about, you know, their manifesto, what they think is important. So we will see come to the House of Assembly in due course what this government has decided for the coming year. within each department, they will make decisions about the priorities. Do we need more junior staff? Do we need more senior staff? And the Perm Sec will make recommendations within their department. But you will see go to the House of Assembly a whole list with each department, job slots. So it is all debated in the House of Assembly. And Mr. Hughes will be pleased to hear that there are more jobs, more people being recruited to AG's chambers. But I won't say more than that because I haven't told the people in AG's chambers yet who they are. But very conscious, as he says, and as the ministers here have said, that more legislation is desperately needed. So there will be more people coming there. Happy to be corrected or added to.
So the reason why the governor would have started is that under the Constitution, our existing Constitution, the governor is responsible for the hiring of the public servants. So it's a strange collaboration because while the governor, through the deputy governor, is responsible for hiring of the public servants and transfers to other ministries, etc., the government of Anguilla, the ministers of government are responsible for over the departments. So we have the ability to state to the department heads what we want to have accomplished, the policy direction that we want to go, etc. But the positions are filled by through the governor's office. And so it starts, as the governor indicated, with identifying the needs within the departments, within the ministry, and ultimately, once those needs have been identified, we have to be able to fund those positions. And once those positions are funded, then the selection, the interview process, etc., takes place. And that is through the, ultimately through the governor's office, but through the Public Service Commission as well, which does the actual hiring or the interview process for the public servants.
I just want to say, please don't send your applications to Her Excellency Governor Crouch, right? You send your applications to public administration. And then it goes through that process, as the Premier said. It goes through the process of interviewing. The governor may never, ever actually meet you or interview you, you know? But as Minister, as Premier said, under the Constitution, the public service, it falls under the governor. And not necessarily Governor Crouch, but governor as the governor.
Regarding priorities, I think the priorities lies with the people. For us as elected members, we need to remind ourselves why we're in that position. It's because we went to the people, asking them what are their needs. And I think that once you give the people what they need, not what you think they want, the chances are you're making the right decisions. And of course, health is always a major priority because it affects all of us, whether right now, tomorrow, or next week. But again, on our island, you talk about health. If someone in the East is affected or passes away, it affects somebody in the West because that's what makes us very special as a people. So again, I often, in the House of Assembly, thank the people of West End for giving me the responsibility to represent them. It's not what I want to do. I do what they want me to do.
I think, just one second. I think one of the things we realize as well with the filling of vacancies is that there needs to be a collaborative approach and lots more communication. For example, what we found a few months in is that there were a number of key roles that were approved from last year, but were not filled or progressed. So as the information was communicated to the department head, it wasn't necessarily filtered down. And so there was an aggressive approach with public administration to hire and fill these roles. So it needs really to be a collaborative effort between the particular ministry and department, but also public administration, because as the Premier indicated, government will approve the roles, we will ensure that there's budgetary commitment, but beyond that, we cannot influence the process. So, you know, then that goes to someone else who's responsible for ensuring that those positions are actually filled.
The last thing that I would like to add is, in terms of strategy for filling these roles, one of the things that we have to look at is compensation. The governor would have mentioned the public service salary review, which is currently underway, where PricewaterhouseCoopers is currently looking at the entire civil service. Because while we may want to fill a role, let's say, for example, looking at health, you may need nurses. But if a nurse can come to Anguilla and make 100,000 as opposed to, say, maybe they could go to St. Martin and make 200,000. So we have to realize that a lot of the issues and needs that we have, particularly in Anguilla and within the region, are shared throughout the region. So I believe a few months ago, Jamaica, being in a similar situation as it pertains to help the not filling workers, had to raise their salaries by like 150% in some instances in order to make it more attractive. Because it's one thing to recruit the skill sets when they have other options in terms of where they could work. But even going back to scholarships, and you, the young people here, we could send you off and train, and you can come back to be bonded or to work for the civil service and to fill these necessary skill gaps and roles. But at the same time, you can also choose to stay outside and you have the opportunity to get greater forms of experience, greater salaries. So we have to balance filling these needs with making it attractive for persons to want to come back. Else we'll continue to face brain drain, or we'll continue to lose opportunities to persons who are going to more attractive jurisdictions.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one tiny constitutional point about why hiring comes under the Governor's office. As Mr. Hughes says, I don't do it all personally, thank goodness. It is done by public admin and it is monitored by the Public Service Commission. But the reason it's in the Constitution is under the Governor is because we have a politically neutral, our Constitution sets up a politically neutral public service. So when the government changes, it's not like America where all the public servants leave and the new government hires new public servants. Public servants are hired, as in the UK and most of the Commonwealth Caribbean, they serve whichever flavour of government comes in, and that's why it's under the Governor's office, so people don't remain. And it's really important that public servants give ministers frank, honest advice. They should try and deliver the minister's objectives at all times, because the ministers are democratically elected, so that's what public servants are here to do. We're all here to help the minister deliver. But where there's bad news to tell the minister you can't afford this or it's illegal, then it's really important that public servants don't worry that they're going to get sacked. That's why the public service is politically independent, and that's why the Constitution puts it under my office. In fact, I legally delegate to the Deputy Governor. So, sorry, that was just a bit of a constitutional point.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Building on what Honourable Mr. Vanderpool was saying about brain drain, there is a big issue that I've personally had a lot of friends come to me with, which addresses even attracting people to our island, which is going to be the price of living, including particularly rent for young people who are unable to leave their family homes, whether they want to or not. And just, is there a way that you as the government can make living independently more affordable for youth and other families as well?
Well, I guess I'll start the ball off rolling here. One of the biggest contributors to the high cost of living in Anguilla is the high cost of electricity. Because beyond your bill for just being at home, running AC, etc., electricity is one of those utilities that touches every aspect of our life. So if someone is in business, for example, and they have to spend a high cost of electricity to maintain freezers, that means the cost of food that are being stored in the freezers also has to increase to be able to compensate. So there's a knock-on effect when at every level you have to kind of value add. So one of the things that we're actively doing since we would have become the new administration is working along with Anguilla and the Caribbean Development Bank to aggressively push towards the implementation of renewable energy. So we do know that Hurricane Irma would have destroyed a 1 megawatt solar plant back in 2017. We're currently aggressively pushing to have tangible renewable energy on the ground by next year. And we're looking at 10 to 12 megawatts in the first instance. So significantly much larger scale than what was there before. We've already allocated the lands, and so we're just working to try and get that fast-tracked. But when you start talking about large-scale projects like this and institutions for financing like the Caribbean Development Bank, unfortunately, it's not something that just happens overnight. But that is one of the aspects that we're doing. And as an administration, we've also been looking at the issue of relief for our young people. Now, we ran a campaign on the promise of GST relief, and we've delivered that. But even looking beyond that to see the ways in which we can help young persons, whether it's by providing some sort of guarantee from government to help you secure the loan that you may be able to need to move out, whether it's identifying lands for public housing projects so that young persons who are looking to move out of their home can move into affordable housing. So we're still young in this as an administration, but these are things that we're actively looking at to provide relief, particularly to our young persons and the persons who need it the most.
Thank you.
I want to say I have a different view to the minister as it relates to housing, public housing projects, right? Everywhere in the world, public housing projects have become a den of criminality and drugs and so forth, everywhere in the world. And I don't see that if we develop public housing, low-income housing and so forth, it will not be any different in Anguilla, all right? It has been proven to be so everywhere else in the world. I also don't believe that having 12 megawatts of renewable energy is going to have any material impact on your cost of living because of a number of external forces and the fact that solar, and I think I know about solar because I'm off-grid. I'm not on Anglex grid. If you produce 10 megawatts of solar, you may get 6. There's a significant amount of wastage, but even as it relates to the Caribbean Development Bank and loan institutions, when you borrow money, you have to repay. And there's a cost and a value added to repaying those loans. So I have a different view as it relates to that. I think that as it relates to housing and affordability and so forth, and salaries for public service, this is a universal issue. Today, there was a major protest in the Bahamas of public servants because they are demanding higher salaries from the government of Bahamas. We see what is happening in the world. In Myanmar, I believe, one of those countries, the government was overthrown yesterday by the army, right? These issues prevail everywhere. So I have a different view. And I think that even as it relates, I think the minister said that where government will guarantee loans. I believe that's what he said. The government of Anguilla is not in a position to guarantee loans. And here's why. In order to be able to guarantee loans, it comes under something called a contingent liability. And the contingent liability lies with the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of how you deal with Framework for Fiscal Responsibility Act and so forth. A lot of these things have to be considered, right? So these are the things that, and then, one of the things that I have to say, and I say this at the expense of getting heavily criticized, when it comes to loans, loans always have to be repaid. And there was a bank in Anguilla called the National Bank of Anguilla that collapsed under the weight of almost 70% non-performing loans. The threshold for non-performing loans is 5%. So imagine 70% of those persons not repaying the loans. So imagine me and John and Kyle and Shelley and all of us borrow money and have the government of Anguilla guarantees that. And 70% of us don't repay. I know, persons may not be happy with me saying this because it don't sound sexy. But I like to speak it as I know it to be.
So just to follow on to the conversation, when this administration is speaking about public housing, we're not talking about projects that you see in other countries. So for instance, we all know Mr. Remington Lake, Remy Lake. He would have built some homes on quarter-acre lots. And so that is what we consider to be housing for the public. So it's not government is building apartments that look like public housing in other communities or in other countries. What we want to do is to be able to assist young persons, young professionals in being able to purchase land and house. So for instance, and what government needs is actually land to be able to do so. That's been a vision of every administration for time immemorial. And so the idea is to be able to have lots of land. And a lot of times we enter into public-private partnerships where you can enter into a relationship with a private sector individual or company that may have the land. The government collaborates with them or with duty-free concessions and different concessions that could be provided. Or if the government has land itself, then the government can undertake a development where you have standalone homes, maybe on quarter-acre lots, etc., so that there's sufficient land around if you wanted to expand. So you can have, for instance, a two-bedroom house with the opportunity to expand on it on your own at some time thereafter. And the government could enter into an arrangement where, with the banking institution, the financial institution, that once persons are pre-approved, so you have to go through an approval process. It's not that the government is underwriting a loan for any particular individual, but there's a pre-approval process so that if it is that you are a young professional, let's say you're a teacher, you know that there's as long as you remain a teacher, you will have that certain salary coming in. And so the bank could pre-approve a loan based on that person's income at that time. And so that is the kind of concept. And we have to think outside the box because, as the member mentioned, Anguilla is one of those countries where the government does not own a significant portion of the land. Majority of the land in Anguilla is privately owned. And the only way the government can undertake a project of that nature is if we acquire a large lot of land, or large lots of land, that we could provide that type of housing facility for persons. And so it's not a project. We're talking about standalone homes where people feel a sense of entitlement. You can rent to own or purchase outright. But these are different things that we have to look at because ultimately we understand that a lot of our children, years ago, everyone's family member had land to give to their children. That's not so much the case anymore today. And so you'll find that you have generations where the parents or the grandparents may have sold the land, so the children now do not have access to that. But they're in Anguilla, they're living, they're working, they want to be able to own something for themselves, and we do believe that it is a responsibility of the government of the day to be able to make those kinds of possibilities available for our people.
We just have a follow-up. Is there like a timeline to when we should expect something like this? We can...
Well, acquisition of land. But we there are also, I think there's another project. There's what's his name? Yeah.
So I just want to say also that it's about vulnerability as well. There are a number of single mothers that I would like to think that government should be able to help. We're not talking about helping persons who can afford. You know, you want to look after the most vulnerable. I know there's a housing block in West End next to the school where, again, that was built on those who are most vulnerable. You don't want to have single parents, especially a mother with children, to be knocked about when they could have a home thanks to the help of government, even if it's for a holding period. It's not that you're building it for life. It is a case of how can you help me get through this period of time.
If I may just add, the member would have indicated that we may have a difference of opinion as it relates to the impact of renewable energy and that impacting the cost of living. It goes beyond just looking at the cost of living now. This is about sustainability and resilience going forward. If we look at our geopolitical climate, we see that there are a number of different nations that are at risk of going to war. Let's think at like what happened with COVID. Supply chains broke down, and that drove up the cost of almost everything that we touch. When we look at the situation between Russia and Ukraine, that led to an energy war that led to spikes in energy costs in the UK. So when we talk about right now, 100% of our electricity, our energy that we use, is generated by fossil fuels, unless it's someone who privately is able to move off the grid. Not everyone has the opportunity to be able to do so. So when we talk about reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, it's because we don't know what the next shock will be. And let's say, God forbid, something were to happen where the oil supply is negatively affected and the cost of diesel doubles or triples. What does that mean for the cost of electricity? And if we're acknowledging that the cost of living at the moment is high, what then happens at that point in time? So it's about our resilience, our sustainability, our ability to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. When we spoke about the climate matters earlier, we see that we talk about the sustainable development goals. We are not on track as a world to get to the net zero in terms of reducing the emissions or the temperatures. The thing is, we know that we are not the biggest contributors to that global change, but we will be the ones who are most adversely affected. So what are we doing to provide our own sustainability, our own resilience, and our own ultimate protection for our people going forward?
I want to say that my views, different views isn't related to renewable energy. I believe that we should go towards renewable energy. But my view is that we should go all the way off fossil fuels, not partially off fossil fuels. I believe that we should go 100% off fossil fuels in one go rather than do it over a period of time because of a number of different issues. And I don't only believe in renewable energy, I also believe in reusable energy. And reusable energy comes from such things as waste to energy, where you can take and you can clean up the Carito landfill and you can extract the even historical, I want to use the word garbage, out of the Carito landfill and use in the waste to energy plant so you can reclaim the land in the Carito landfill. And that too can also be land that you can use for either windmills or whether you're going to use solar or whatever else you're going to use. You know, so there's technology that's out there. Jibri Lewis developed a hydroelectric plant when he was in high school. I remember going to one of those science fairs when he was in sixth form where he had this prototype. That prototype has been advanced to the point where it works, right? So even here in Anguilla, we have the technical expertise to create energy out of the wave actions of our oceans that we have a lot of. So my view isn't that we shouldn't go towards renewable energy. My view is that we should explore the possibilities of going 100% into renewable energy and reusable energy, using a variety of different energy sources that are not tied to fossil fuels, because we know what happened in 2017. We had a 1 megawatt solar plant over in Carito, and we lost 100% of it.
So if I could just add, as it relates to renewable energy, it has been a very hot conversation recently. If you're following Executive Council minutes, the government would have agreed to earmark a portion of lands in Carito to allow Anglic to develop their 12 megawatt solar panel farm. But in addition to that, because that is just phase one, in addition to that, it's a mix of renewable energy, which includes waste to energy, like the member would have said. I would have visited St. Bart's, where we had some high-level discussions with a company called Peprec. They deliver the waste to energy that powers their desalination plant, that pulls from the sea and filters the water and then stores it. So we are having these different discussions with our neighbors in order to achieve our renewable energy goals. I know Anglic and CDB, they are in some conversations right now, and we're hoping for some results very, very soon.
The last thing that I would like to add is on this Saturday, we actually have a group that will be leaving from Anguilla. There will be a representative from my ministry, being the permanent secretary, representatives from the regulator, the Public Utilities Commission, representatives from Anglic, as well as a community representative. They will be leaving to attend the Blue Planet Alliance in Hawaii. Now, this is a nonprofit, fully funded trip where they bring together every 6 months 6 to 10 small island developing states. They bring together that mix of people to discuss Hawaii's experience in their transition towards 100% renewable energy. In fact, they have legislated that by 2045 they want to achieve that. As of the end of this year or early next year, they will actually be at their goal of 30% by 2030. So they are ahead of schedule. And what they found by bringing together these persons every 6 months to have these conversations is that you're able to share lessons, be able to share knowledge, and be able to build the network and the capacity and the relationships needed in order to one day get to 100% renewable energy. When they started, they weren't where they are now, and they made a lot of mistakes. But we are learning from those mistakes, and that's why these collaborations and these trips are important in bringing together these persons. Now, again, this is fully funded by a billionaire who just decides that he's passionate about it. But at the last conference, we had Antigua and St. Kitts being the most recent persons from within the region to be able to sign on to this alliance and fellowship. And by signing on, what we get is ongoing support, collaboration, and expertise to help us transition. So I look forward to getting a report from the team when they get back to Anguilla, and for seeing how we can continue our road towards 100% renewables in Anguilla.
The good thing about renewable energy is that we're like a bad choir. We all singing from the same hymn book, just different tunes. But it's good that I think everyone agrees that renewable energy is the way to go. But the question had to do with the cost of living in Anguilla overall, not just the electricity cost. And one of the things I think needed fast, quick, and in a hurry is price control. I think we are overdue for price control by now. And it has been proven in Anguilla that price control can work. A lot of persons might not realize, but there's price control at the pumps. The pumps, when you pump your gas, it's always decided by Executive Council through the Ministry of Economic Development. They do their work, check, and then decide this is the minimum, this is the maximum you should be selling your fuel for. So we always change it up when it's needed. And I think the same thing can be done for the baskets of goods. When the GST legislation was first put into place, the regular basket of goods, they were GST exempted. And I think the same thing can be done for price control when it comes to the regular basket of goods, because there are certain things that everyone needs to eat. And if the price of food keeps rising, 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 and you can't eat, you don't care about putting on a light switch. You don't care about going to the pump if you're starving. So I think that is the first and foremost thing that we should be looking at. How do we control the price of food? At least makes it manageable for the everyday person. Now, in terms of, I heard persons from the government side talking about going through the banking institutions, but government more or less is in control of a statutory body, the development board, through the budgetary allocations, rather than trying to find land in Anguilla, because we all know how land goes in Anguilla, and the cost of land in Anguilla. By the time government purchases that land, nobody might be able to afford a house. But through the development board, a statutory body that the government is responsible for, funding can be put into there to make it affordable for first-time homeowners. It has already been done for small businesses. We saw the minister made an announcement recently where there will be grants for first-time, I think business owners or some type of business for business owners. So there's a record of these things that can be done. So the same way like with price control, it's already in the books that it can be done. The same thing is there with granting the development board money from the government of Anguilla. And now when it comes to the building, which is probably one of the foremost things on young people's mind, how do we build? As a farmer administration, one of the things we had in the works under the farmer GST plan was to first-time owners to give them a complete rebate on all GST that was affiliated with their building. So by the time the construction is finished, you get a rebate. The same way that all businesses was getting that rebate, you would get a rebate, and then you can probably look to furnish your house and do the finishing touches, and you can move into a brand new facility. But it can be just one aspect that we're looking at. And like I said, renewable energy is great. It's great. And like a bad choir, we're all singing from the same hymn book on that. But there are other aspects. We need to look at the rising cost of food, the rising cost of fuel, and how we, as a people, can make it better for the everyday man.
I want to say something as it relates to that. The cost of living in Anguilla is historically high. My uncle, who lived to be 98 years old, wrote 2 books. And I was reading one of his books, and he was talking about the significant increase in the cost of living in 1946. So he was born in 1926. So in 1946, he would have been a man. And then he spoke about the extreme increase in the cost of living in the 1960s, right? So we have always had a high cost of living, and that is why we were a smuggling community. We smuggled everything into Anguilla because of that high cost. Now we're in a geographically disadvantaged position as it relates to businesses because people can always hop on a ferry and run over to St. Martin and do their shopping. There's a number of things. We have price control already with the fuel at the pumps, in that you have a maximum price card based on the cost to be imported. But the former Anguilla United Front administration, when they were in office, they had a basket of items that they had a maximum price order, so to speak, during the COVID period. I believe it was agreed that these costs should not be more than 40%, correct me if I'm wrong, 40% more than what the buying cost is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think, right? And when we came to office, it expired, and we extended it in October of 2020. But we also did an analysis of this price control. Remember I said 40%. in many instances, businesses had increased the cost to the consumer by up to 400%. So price control needs to also comes with consumer protection. And we have a consumer protection unit that was established, I believe, in 2024. And they have to go out there and ensure that these prices are within those parameters. But there's also something to consider. Price control sometimes lead to shortages or total absences from the shelves. Because businesses will have a high value item, but they shift the cost of that item to other items and so forth. When that flexibility is removed and government is setting certain parameters, sometimes businesses decide, you know what, I'm not going to bring milk in the island anymore because we're not making a profit on milk. So it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about cost of living, especially in a jurisdiction like Anguilla. Because if you go to St. Martin, the people in St. Martin bawl about the cost of living over there. You go to Turks and Caicos, my God, the highest electricity cost in the Caribbean, right? They scream about the cost of living. And if you go to the United States of America, people are protesting over the cost of living. So it's a very difficult thing that everyone have to deal with. But I would say this quickly, to use the words of A.W.I, plant a tree and let it grow. A word for A.W.I on the radio. And what I'm saying is that every one of us have the ability to plant things. There was a time in our history where we barely bought anything from the shop. We got away from that once money started flowing into the country. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, I invite anybody to come and see what I do. From my own personal experience, you can plant almost everything that you need. And I'm experimenting with apple trees now.
So just to add to the conversation, even today before I left home, I would have seen that President Trump would have said that, he's no longer doing business with China, because China, is sending a lot of oil, cooking oil to America, and America is was exporting a lot of soybeans to China. But since, the whole trade war situation, China refuses to continue purchasing from the farmers in America. So even a situation like that today, can affect prices in the coming weeks. So we are aware of the situation happening, especially in America. And what we have been doing recently is trying to explore different trade routes, whether it's through Panama, Santo Domingo, the United Kingdom. Just recently, I know stores in the B.W.I would have showcased a line of products from the United Kingdom. Prior to the tariff war that's going on, they were sourcing all these products from America. So businesses are getting smarter, and they realize the need to look beyond. But when we talk about price control, and the member spoke about fuel being controlled, fuel is a single commodity. It's very easy to control. It doesn't change in size as other commodities do. For the most part, it is one brand. Fuel is fuel, right? So when it comes to price controlling, let's say 30, 40 items in a store, it's a lot more difficult than we think. Brands change, sizes change, weight change. These are all things that we have to take into consideration. And we spoke about staffing. Government departments not having, adequate staff. The member also spoke about our maximum price in 2019. The maximum price, 40%? 2020. And then, you still saw instances of prices going above 40%. So we are looking at it. Consumer Affairs Unit, they are monitoring about 35 products right now as it relates to what the costs were earlier in the year and what the cost is now. What we're going to do first and foremost is to develop a price awareness mechanism where we would publish prices and try to encourage natural competition, because we live in a free market society where we don't necessarily want to engage in controlling pricing. It is something that's not totally off the books, But we want to take a different approach in the interim, and if that works, then we don't have to go any further. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to look at other measures to control costs for the benefit of the consuming public.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes left, so we're going to take some more questions from the audience. Any questions?
Any topics we haven't addressed yet that people would like to hear about? Please voice your concerns.
Thank you. Just from conversations with friends at gatherings, I would like to have a better understanding about where the AI money goes, if that's public information, just because I have absolutely no idea. Where does the AI money go, and how do you decide what it's spent on?
It goes to the consolidated fund. Every dollar that comes into government, every dollar that comes into government's coffers goes into what is called a consolidated fund. And just like the normal budgetary process, you allocate to the needs of the country, right? I think Carter spoke about the needs of the people and so forth. You allocate based on that. But every dollar that is collected, whether it's customs duty, whether it's .ai, whether it's whatever it is, it goes into one consolidated fund. It's called a consolidated fund under the Financial and Audit Act. But I know the plan was that you will develop what is somewhat of a sovereign wealth fund, like what Norway and those countries have. That was the plan, that you will allocate certain portions of the .ai funds specifically to that. But you can do that through appropriations, and that is not off the table. So that is where all money for government goes.
So when would we start to see some of those monies trickle down?
It's already trickling. It goes into the consolidated fund, and then it's allocated out through budgetary process. We've been receiving .ai money for a long time. It's just that now it's much more than what it used to be. But that money is already trickling. That money is going towards airport development. It's going towards paying salaries. It's a number of different things.
Just in order to add to what the member would have said in terms of determining how it was spent, we would have spoken a bit about the budgetary process earlier in the sit-in. But while every ministry has needs, and AI might be bringing in one form of revenue, as the member said, it goes in that consolidated fund because there are some arms and branches of government that are not revenue generating. So for example, education, teaching, you're paying, whether it's teachers, paying for the schools, all of that comes at a cost. So it has to come from essentially tax revenues, which includes AI. When we talk about health, you have to make investments there that while you still get charged at the hospital, the full cost is not necessarily absorbed. When we talked about safety and police don't go there and make money unless it's from tickets, but you still have to find a way to fund and pay for these programs. Now, one of the things that was introduced for the first time in this budgetary cycle is the Ministry of Finance would have gone out and do some public surveys to hear from persons within the community how they would like to see the tax dollars allocated. So while we as ministers might have come with our priorities, there was also information and data there from the public to kind of say, well, this is what's important to us. And it was a very insightful process, and we talked about how it can even be built upon and improved further next year to get more involvement directly from the community, directly from the youth, so that you can see how we go about allocating it. And as the member would have spoken to, whether a sovereign wealth fund or a national development fund, where you kind of have a better idea as to how you go about allocating those, yes, those discussions are still ongoing. Because while you're looking at funding the programs and the needs that you have right now in these various sectors, we also need to look at protecting this wealth for future generations to be able to make sure that it isn't all just spent. So I hope that adds a bit more context to your question.
Thank you.
So we have a question to the governor. It's from the audience. Hopefully I get their question correctly, because they said that recently the government has hired someone to review government salaries. I believe this company also would have done similar exchanges in B.W.I. And they said that in B.W.I, the minimum wage workers are, I want to say protesting, but they are not satisfied with the increase in their pay. They believe that it wasn't enough. How are you going to alleviate this so that the same company doesn't make the same mistake they made in B.W.I. here in Anguilla?
So essentially, there was a procurement exercise to select the company who won the contract to do this work. PwC, as people will know, is a very big international accounting firm. I think we can all, I think there's probably a lot of people who are disappointed in their salary, but they will do the work based on evidence. So they will look at a number of factors. They'll look at wages around the region. They'll look at the cost of living here. They will also look at things like difficulty of recruitment. So they do it on a factual basis. But yeah, I can't guarantee that everybody will be happy. And we need to be careful about managing expectations. I've heard all sorts of wild figures about what the salary increase will be. If you hear a figure about what it's going to be, don't believe it, because none of us know until PwC have done their work. And it won't be a fixed amount. They will look at different roles. So it is a complicated, but it is an evidence-based process.
While you answer the question, I was whispering to the governor, is it ever? Because no salary increase is ever enough, right? And I don't think that any salary increase that is given, whether it's in the B.W.I or whether it's in Anguilla, will ever be enough, right? We worked in hospitality, we know that whenever, even if you get a 20%, oh, this is all I'm getting, 20% increase, this is all I'm getting. So it's really never enough. But one of the things that people have to understand, in particular public service, is that there's a pool of money. There's a pool, so it's $10. And that $10 is not only to pay you as a public servant, but it's to provide all the goods and services of the country. The minister spoke about non-revenue generation ministries such as education. When there was a health authority, government of Anguilla was subsidizing the health authority to over $20 million a year. That's more than $1 million a month, right? So yes, we all want to be paid more. So if government, let us say government had the total leeway to pay public servants whatever they demanded, but then the roads can't get repaired and buildings start to fall apart. So we have to also understand these things, right? So I think the governor spoke about managing expectations, and I think that we really have to manage expectations, not only in Anguilla, but everywhere, really, truly.
Thank you very much. Our last question for the evening is going to be a little bit more of a personal note. I wanted all of our ministers grew up in Anguilla, and I wanted to know what impacted you as a young person that made you want to become a leader, or what programs really contributed to your success as an individual or within your community. And this is across the board.
Okay, I'll start. Growing up in the village that I'm from, North Hill. Yeah, you can shout. Best village, best district, and you are welcome to be in the best district this evening. But I grew up in North Hill. Some of the older folks would remember back in the day when volleyball used to be the #1 sport in Anguilla. There were two top teams, one from North Hill, one from Stony Ground, Freebirds and Crush. I wasn't a volleyball player originally, I was a basketball player. And because my two best partners, Teacher Perry and Cameron Pacolai, decided they wanted to play volleyball, I had no choice to go over and started to play. So I started playing with the team, and Captain Charlie, who formerly captained the Real Deal, was probably the best volleyball player on the island at the time. And I was about 17, 18, 19, and he decided to give me the captaincy of the team. And in my first acts as captain of the team, one Aristo Theodore Richardson, as he liked to call his full name, decided not to come practice for the week. And because he didn't come practice for the week, I as the captain decided to bench him. And we almost lost that game, and the entire North Hill community almost lynched me. But that opened up my eyes, believe it or not, to leadership. I never seek a role in politics, but being a small community, I was always involved in training the youngsters, being involved with the youngsters all the time. So it kind of felt natural to just do things that was required of a leader. If you see a youngster going astray, you pull him aside, you speak to him, and you just did what you grew up seeing the older folks around you doing. So I think, in short, And to make a long story short, I think I was just inspired by the number of young men at the time around me, Charlie, Nick, Aristo, Sanka, rest in peace. Those guys, they just did what was necessary to be the leaders for us as the younger ones. And as they grew up, got their families, and couldn't be around as much, I kind of took on that mantle as well, and it was just like a natural procession. So that's how I got in my role as being a quote-unquote leader.
I'll jump in next. Interestingly enough, like my colleague, in terms of, if you had asked me 10 years ago, would I be sitting here now, or did I ever want to get involved in politics? I saw my life going that way. No, that wasn't the case. In fact, while I know that our education system here, yes, it's not perfect, but I think that often we give it more knocks than it deserves, because we have all passed through it, and it has set us up for a solid foundation. One that, in my case, I am grateful to have been recognized as the Island Scholar, which gave me the opportunity. It's the people of Anguilla who was able to fund my education at the University of Bristol. My background is in computer science. I didn't think I would have needed political science to be here. But when I saw myself wanting to come back to give back, because I was bonded, part of the agreement is I would come back and work in Anguilla for 5 years. Interestingly enough, the same way I didn't necessarily see politics, I once told myself, oh, I wouldn't get involved in hospitality. My first job back was IT manager at Malihana Resort, where I got involved in hospitality. I once told myself I wouldn't be a teacher. I ended up, while in opposition, teaching 1 year for free pro bono and putting on the annual coding camps. And likewise, my cousin who passed away, God rest his soul, Callan, once told me while studying, you know, one day you're gonna come back and be in politics. And I said, cause that will never happen. So interestingly enough, wanting to come back to give back is as a result of what I would have gotten out of the system. And an opportunity came up where government told me, you had a lot of good ideas, but are you willing to put your money where your mouth is and have a seat at the table when when the nominated members, which were appointed, the vacancy came up? So I took that seat at the table. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I saw was for young people, I feel like they had a sentiment where they became disenfranchised with the whole political system, because they feel like people will come look for them at election time, but beyond that, politicians wasn't really checking for them. But these are the young people that I was on the basketball court with. So if I say, what do you guys think about this legislation that coming to the House of Assembly this week? And it got to a point that in 2019, we did away with the last of the nominated appointments, and it was replaced with the island-wide seats. It was the young people and those in the community who said, when I was like, do you think I should run? They were like, you have to run. We want you to run. So it became to a point where, while it wasn't something that I set out to do, naturally progressed. And in life, sometimes that happens. Man plans and God laughs. You may go off and get a scholarship to study in one area and then come back and work in a completely different field. In fact, more often than not, that's usually how it goes. So I'm grateful for the opportunity that the people of Anguilla have placed me in. I'm grateful for the opportunity that they see me and the privilege to represent them and to lead in such a capacity. But right now, my job is to prepare, give back my input, and then hand on to you the next generation of leaders. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing which face in this room will ultimately be one here sitting up here for straight up conversations.
Okay, unlike the other two persons, I've had a keen interest in politics for a very long time. I wasn't sure if that would actually matriculate to actually people being willing to vote for you. But I've been interested in politics from a teenager, followed motorcades, so always been involved in and around politics. And I think the trajectory of my life really changed significantly when I had the opportunity to get a government scholarship to study arts management. And so I always talk about that opportunity because I think it has been instrumental in shaping my life and my future. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about government scholarships generally. And I try to promote them. I try to encourage people to access them because I know how it can change your life, and I know the types of opportunities that it can provide for you. And so being given access to that government scholarship opened up a wall for me in terms of employment as a public servant. So I've always wanted to work in a public service, by the way. Most people don't necessarily look for a life in public service, but that's something that I wanted. So I was happy to come back. I was happy after the completion of my scholarship to come back home to continue walking. Before politics, I was a public servant for 15 years. I started out at 18 years old as a public servant. So, to me, the ability to work in a public service and go the extra mile, sometimes it's the simple things that really make the difference to people. And I see that every single day. Something that may be very simple for me and takes little to no time, just following up, giving a department head a call or asking them to follow up on this, truly makes a difference for persons. And I think that's the most joy that I get out of this job, certainly, is seeing, how people's lives are impacted just simply by you sometimes sending an email or making a phone call or asking someone to follow up on something or give this person an opportunity. And so I think the most impactful thing that has led me here is definitely the opportunity to be able to be formally trained. And so I have a responsibility now as a leader to ensure that every single Anguillian gets a fighting chance, no matter your socioeconomic background, an opportunity to be trained, whether that is in technical and vocational training, whether it's in a more traditional academic area, that they have a fighting chance to do whatever they desire to do.
Okay, for me, it really wasn't a straight road like my colleague here. Although I was always very civic-minded, wanting to stay abreast and in tune from a very young age with what's going on, within your country, because you have to be awake, right? But I've always also paid attention to politics in the region and listen to activists in debates. Somehow I was always drawn to political argument and people who would go out and fight for other people, and I figure a politician should be doing that. If you have politicians doing the right thing, then there's no need for activists to go out and try to crucify you or criticize you. So quite naturally, just was always drawn to people and being passionate about people's well-being. But I started off in business, and the business that I started off in, obviously, it kept me close to people, and I would always have conversation. I'm somebody that just love to speak and love to listen, in especially small settings. So being civic-minded and passionate about issues and wanting to see results and see change. And like the young lady said earlier, she asked the question, why things take so long, why legislation takes so long. I always wondered that too, so I got involved. And now I understand why it takes long, So we see an issue as business people, and we try to fix and resolve as much issues as possible. And I believe that, in a political role, you're supposed to deliver ultimately for the people around you. So just long story short, being civic-minded. Yeah.
Sorry, can I go for you because, you're the honorable premier. In the interest of time, I won't give you the 2-hour story as to how I got involved in politics. But what I'll say is this. My father would have been 92 years old today. He was Chief Minister of Anguilla 3 times. And he was the last person in Anguilla to run for the party of Robert Llewellyn Brasher in 1960, long before he even met my mother in Barbados. Long before. And he was a young man in his 20s when he ran for political office, because back then it was one island constituency. So he had a campaign from Island Harbour to West End. And when he passed, he's buried here at the Bethel Methodist Church. And if you see his tomb, the concept is open doors, because for all the years that I lived in my father's house, I have never seen him close his doors. And anybody who drives past in the day, you'll see him on the porch with his shirt on, right? So I grew up in that environment, and he was an anti-colonialist, so I was indoctrinated differently, right? But I want to say this, something that was very impactful for me with my father is this. In 1995, Hurricane Louis hit Anguilla, and Cap Juluca was destroyed. And Cap Juluca brought in a significant number of, my father was the chief minister at the time, brought in a significant number of expat workers to rebuild the hotel. And one morning, he was having breakfast on his porch, and some of the local workers came up to his home just after 7 in the morning while he was having breakfast. And they were complaining about a situation down there, the dispute between the local workers and the expat workers. My father was in his boxer, and he was the head of state. I don't expect you to do this, Madam Premier. And my father left his porch in his boxer, no shoes, and went on to Cap Juluca and sorted out in no time, all right? And so I don't want to go about talk about my years of service because time is against us. But I was influenced basically from my environment and what I see and how my aunts and my uncles, right, and how they took care of the community. And sometimes in terms of taking care of the community, today we have social media, so everything is glamorized and publicized. But in terms of my uncles, my aunts, my brother.
And the first time I saw my mom I was age 15 when I went to England. So when I talk about single parents, one of the things that struck a chord with me was going up to bed 9 o'clock at night and seeing my mother go out in the snow and the rain with an anorak and an umbrella. She had to leave Anguilla when I was 1 year old because she was a single parent. I was also brought up in a household where my aunt, too, was a single parent. And today I'm very proud of my cousins. My aunt, her body is ridden with arthritis and rheumatism, and I love her so much. For me, I grew up, I thought, looking back, you might think that you were poor, but you weren't. Because around you, the youngsters were in the same position. I was fortunate enough to go to England at 15. I had a great passion for cricket and was given a great opportunity to play for Hampshire County Cricket Club for 15 years. I played in England for 6 months, Australia for 6 months. I played with the best cricketers in the world. I shared a house with a friend of mine who's in heaven, Malcolm Marshall. He died from cancer 26 years ago. But a huge impact on my life. I remember walking through the gym in Australia, and it's like a voice came to me and said, Cardi, why are you here in Australia coaching Australians when you should be at home in Anguilla finding a cricketer to play for the West Indies? Whether it was my conscience that was talking to me or not, those voices were real. The house that I built in West End, every night before I would go to sleep, especially when I was playing for Hampshire, that was part of my affirmation to build a home back home in Anguilla. I came back to Anguilla, and I was fortunate enough to have met 3 youngsters in primary school, 9-year-olds, Shaka Hodge, Zach Kenworthy, and Omari Banks. Those were the jewels that I was looking for. Shaka made the West Indies team at 13 for the under-15s. Omari made it for the under-19s and the first Anguillian to play Test cricket. Zach is now a producer or a director at Fox Sports. Along the way, many others have succeeded. I never set out to become a politician. In fact, I despise how some politicians act. So I did not see myself as being a politician. But there was a gentleman in West End, and he was a politician, but he was an unusual politician. His name was Albert Belter Hughes. He cared about everybody. So I felt that if I could be like him, I don't have to be like some of the other politicians. And the fact is, today, that the people in West End have voted me a 3rd term in office. I am truly grateful. I am proud to be Anguillan. When I talk about youth in sports and giving them opportunities, God was good to me. He gave me an opportunity to play on the best fields in the world and show me what opportunities are out there. It is my intention, whether I'm in office in 5 years' time or not, but as long as I've got breath in my body, I'll be a representative of the people. I thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have this also be the final words by Premier Cora Richardson Hodge, as well as your story as well.
I was thinking that you thought mine was too long. So. All right, so as many of you know, I was born in St. Thomas, the second of 5 children. And as a young child, I suffered from severe asthma, so my parents sent me here to Anguilla. And so I attended preschool and some part of primary school, and then I went back to St. Thomas. Graduating from high school, I knew my parents had no money to send me off to college, and so my only opportunity was to be able to find a school that would be able to offer grants, scholarships, and loans. I even applied to the Army, and I received an Army scholarship, but thankfully, school scholarship came through, and I didn't have to go that route. But I went to school for environmental engineering. I did about 3 years of civil engineering and graduated with an environmental science degree. But at that point, I was going to go on to do a master's in environmental engineering, and I thought about law. And the reason why I thought about law is because in high school, I remember my mom driving, and every time she had this car, and every time she takes the car to the mechanic, they would fix something, but then 3 days later, there was another problem. And finally realized that it was something the mechanic was doing to force her to come back. And I said to her, Mom, you have rights. You need to challenge this. And she said, oh, I'll leave it up to God. And that infuriated me so much. And so I said, after my first degree, I said, you know what, maybe I should apply to go to law school because people need to know what their rights are. So I applied, and I was able to take the LSAT and apply, get into a college. I got another scholarship and opportunity. And as I finished, I came back to Anguilla, met my husband, and we started our lives here. Fast forward a few years, I opened my own law firm, and I did quite a bit of pro bono work because, again, in the back of my head, people need to know what their rights are. Sometimes people come to you, they needed help, they had no money, and it was difficult to turn people away when you saw that they needed that type of assistance and you could provide it. So I did my fair share of pro bono matters. And the opportunity arose where I was paying attention to the political arena. I had no formal interest in it, and I started to take certain views in terms of what was happening in the country and decisions that were being made. And when the opportunity arose and I was approached, I said, well, you know what, Cora, you're complaining, you don't like the way things are being done. You either get involved or you shut up about it. And so I got involved. And so since 2015, I entered the political arena in 2010. I was unsuccessful, and then in 2015, I was successful. The people of District 2 decided to put their faith and trust in me, and I was elected again in 2020 and in 2025. And so throughout my entire political career, but also my legal career, my focus has always been on people being able to help persons reach to a higher level, a greater level than where they are. I'm also very keen in terms of scholarship opportunities because I understand I'm one of those persons that if an opportunity had not been open to me, I don't know what would have happened to me. And so it's a focus of not just mine, but this administration to ensure that as many opportunities as possible are provided to our young people, that we find it and we open the doors for our young people. And so I want to encourage all persons, do not think that you don't have an opportunity. There is someone that can assist you. If you have a vision, go for it. Do not believe that you cannot achieve it because your parents can't afford to send you to school or you don't have the money. There is a way. Where there is a will, there is a way, and I encourage every one of you to seek your dreams. And if it is that you have no interest in tertiary education, that you want to work, ensure that you receive the type of, whether it's short courses, qualifications, whatever you need, because at some point, you're going to want to rely on these qualifications to be able to move up the ladder from wherever you are and whatever you're doing. So with that being said, I want to thank our young persons. I want to thank our hosts. the persons who are here this evening. I think that tonight brings us to the end of the Youth Week programs.
Yes, this is the ending of it.
And so I want to thank all of you for being here this evening, for coming out and listening, asking questions. It has been very insightful for us as well. We brought our books. I may not have taken notes, but I remember everything that was said, because what it says to us is that you have an interest in the progression of our country. You have an interest in what we as a government, where we are, what our plans are for the country and for you as young persons. And so we truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final words from the Governor, Her Excellency.
Really just to echo that it's been a very interesting evening. I certainly learned a lot listening to everybody. It did just occur to me that we often criticise politicians in the UK and here. And I have to admit, when I first joined the civil service and saw how hard politicians work in the UK, I was actually shocked, because it's easy to knock politicians. And I have to say that irrespective of parties, the politicians here work incredibly hard for their constituents. So they do need our support, and I do appreciate having heard from everybody here tonight. And I personally wouldn't have the guts to go and be elected. These people put themselves out on a limb. They take a lot of criticism. And I think it's brilliant that we're having this democratic debate, and I hope we can continue to do that. So thank you for facilitating it.
Thank you. We appreciate everybody's contributions this evening for making it a great conversation. Do not worry that we have not forgotten you guys with food. We've saved some plates. I was instructed to share that information. And I will be passing on to Jenai for a final vote of thanks.
Good night, everyone. So on behalf of the National Youth Ambassador Corps, I want to sincerely thank all our honorable ministers and Her Excellency for taking their time to come out and openly engaging with us on this wonderful night. So your presence and honesty mean a lot to the young people of Anguilla. A big thank you to our moderators, Devin Carter and Isabel Curtis, for keeping the discussion lively and focused, and to all our youth ambassadors for showing true spirit and making the most of what was Youth Month. So special thanks to Catherine with Events with Catherine, and Karan from CleanStream for live streaming the event and helping us reach a wider audience. And finally, thank you to everyone who came out and supported. Together, we are truly building tomorrow today. Thank you and good night.